In the depths of a dungeon, an adventurer wandering around grinding to gain the experience he needs. But unfortunately for him, he walked straight into a boss battle and he didn't quick save before he got here, so he is screwed. Against a monster like that with the whole introduction animation, he stands zero chance with his subpar equipment and weak skill level. So he just stands there and awaits death, with his only regret being that he never got the chance to become a mithril ranked adventurer. That day the adventurer died, but sometime later his body, or what is left of it, begins to move again. He doesn't understand why he is still alive because he is certain that he definitely got cooked by the boss, but to his horror he looks in a puddle and discovers he has become even skinnier than he was before. Up on the surface, adventurers usually start their day early, but that's not because they want to, it is because they are poor. The only people who get to sleep until noon are rich people or researchers with a coffee addiction and a sleeping disorder. Though he may be biased because he knows a researcher who would tell him that she sometimes gets so hyper-fixated on her research that she forgets to sleep. He should probably go check on her at some point to make sure she doesn't end up killing herself. With that said, neither of those conditions apply to our MC Rento, who is currently struggling to pay the rent as a bronze adventurer. He has to wake up early because the quests that are available to be taken care of first come, first served type of deal, so you've got to be there on time if you don't want to get stuck with the terrible ones. But if you don't end up finding any quests that are suitable for you, then you're going to have to go into the labyrinth to make ends meet. And on this day, that is exactly what happened to Rent, so he decided to go into the labyrinth of Moon's Reflection. Most adventurers work in teams, but Rent often works solo. He says there are a number of reasons for this, but the main one is that he sucks at being an adventurer. In fact, is still in bronze rank after having been an adventurer for over 10 years now. As long as he can hunt and sell materials to the guild, he will be able to survive on the money they pay him. So surprisingly, Rent's life is actually pretty stable, especially considering he saved up enough money in case of emergencies, so he's already better than most regular people. He headed into the labyrinth, but on this day, the calm, analytical mind that has allowed him to survive as an adventurer went on vacation because he found something that should have been impossible. As he walked through the labyrinth, which had had every inch of it explored, there was a hole in the wall just sitting there. This wasn't recorded on the map, so Rent believed it must be a new passageway that was created by the labyrinth. This was a major discovery, and also when his brain went on vacation, so against better judgment, he entered the clearly dangerous hidden room. The further in he goes, the more convinced he is that must be an unexplored area, and the only thing going through his mind is the thought of what amazing treasures may be lying here, waiting to be discovered, not realizing that there would probably be something guarding that treasure, but even if there isn't anything he can get, just delivering this information to the guild would be enough to get him a lot of money. So he continues to explore the dungeon without a care in the world. Normally, he would have avoided a place like this, but being blinded by all the rewards he could earn, he ventured into this dangerous place without any backup or method of scouting out danger. And his recklessness only got him into trouble as he came face to face with a dragon. And not just any dragon either, this angel-looking monstrosity was a true dragon. The legends say they are able to take on many forms, and it often differs from what would be considered normal for a dragon, but as it slowly approached Rent, even though he had never actually seen one in person before, he was sure that this must be a dragon. Its presence alone was enough to freeze Rent in place out of fear, but even if he was able to move against a being that stands at the apex of monsters as a bronze adventurer, Rent stood absolutely no chance. Yet here is still somewhat alive despite being eaten by a dragon, but that only means he must have come out the other side. He's glad to still be alive, but this doesn't really count as being alive. He is now a skeleton, an undead monster. He thinks about going back to town to figure things out, but then he realizes that the second he steps out of the labyrinth, he is going to be captured and purified until there is nothing left, so he decides not to go there for now. He tries to keep calm and think about this rationally so he doesn't end up making any huge mistakes, but first he grabs his sword and gets up. He doesn't feel the presence of that dragon anywhere nearby, but it is better to be safe than sorry, so he leaves the area and heads back into the labyrinth. He continues to wander around looking for an adventurer to talk to, but they are all probably going to a more popular dungeon now. If he waits a few days, he may be able to find a solo adventurer coming from through and ask him for help, but if he wants to do that, he's going to need to be able to talk first, and he doesn't have a mouth anymore. From around the corner, Rent notices a skeleton just standing there, but once it finally sees him, it still chooses to attack despite Rent being a skeleton as well. Rent readies his sword to swing on the skeleton, but as he charges towards it, he realizes that his transformation into a skeleton has come with one major debuff. All of his gym gains are gone. With his bony structure, he is now unable to even swing his sword without falling over because he is so weak, but fortunately, The same goes for the skeleton that is attacking him as it falls over on itself and loses a leg. While it tries to reattach itself, Rent just laughs and thinks of a strategy to defeat it. While he's no skin and all bones like this, you won't be able to use the swordsmanship skills that require you to have actual muscle, but his decision-making brain comes back from vacation and he remembers that he can use his special ability, Spirit. He manages to activate the ability just as the other skeleton reattach its leg and they are set to fight again. But this time, while they are still both skeletons, Rent has something to give him an edge. His spirit ability, which enhances his bones and allows him to actually use his sword to fight like he normally would. So as the skeleton runs up to him, he cracks it over the head with the sword and sidesteps before smashing it all together. A skeleton has been defeated and Rent gives a sigh of relief that he managed to survive, but the body of the dead skeleton began to glow to his surprise and green energy flowed into him from it. Rent notices that the energy he has expended in that fight had been replenished in an instant, so he wonders if this might be the mysterious attribute that monsters have. He remembers his researcher friends talking about how monsters are able to become more powerful with age and experience, but is on a different level from what is possible for a human to do. A skeleton would always be a skeleton, but in some rare cases, it will be able to evolve into a ghoul. That is because of existential evolution, something that she was currently researching at the time. Brent thinks he can use this to his advantage since ghouls have flesh and almost look exactly like a human, so if he were able to transform into one, he might also be able to get back into the city if he disguises himself with a robe and a mask or something. So he now has his new goal of slaying monsters in this dungeon and becoming a ghoul. Back with his researcher friend, she is feeling a little lonely since Rent isn't showing up to her house like he usually does, but she accepts that he won't be coming today, so she goes to get dinner ready. In the labyrinth, Rent has successfully killed 5 skeletons so far and is steadily gaining experience and agility as he levels up. It also seems like the light that he absorbs has some kind of recovery effect, so he is able to keep using his spirit indefinitely. With how well things are going for him, Rent decides it may be time to try challenging one of the stronger monsters in the labyrinth. He walks through the halls until he comes face to face with a slime, and though they are resistant to physical attacks, they can easily be defeated with magic. But unfortunately, Rent is not talented enough to have offensive magic at his disposal. At best, he can only use basic spells for everyday activities, so he is forced to use physical attacks to defeat it. There are 2 methods to accomplish this. One, he can either break through the slime's core that is constantly moving around in its body, or he can destroy the gelatinous body to the point that it is beyond regeneration. But he isn't strong enough to do that normally and is going to have to go all out just to not get himself dissolved by the slime. The slime launches 3 acid balls at Rent in an attempt to dissolve him, but he dodges and goes in for a strike, and luckily, he managed to hit the slime's core and defeat it. Back on the surface, a guild receptionist gets asked if she can help a new adventurer find a good party to team up with. The girl is inexperienced, but she is good with handling a sword, so she isn't completely unneeded. Unfortunately, there weren't any parties that were a good fit for her, so the receptionist was planning to ask Rent to take care of her in the meantime, but he hasn't returned to the town since the previous day, which is out of character for him. Back in the labyrinth, Rent is taking a break, but he realizes that he doesn't get sleepy anymore and he has no appetite since he has no stomach. Since he can basically run on a broke college student's routine, he tries fighting through the entire night, but even that wasn't enough to get him his evolution. Still, it's not all bad since when he first woke up as a skeleton, his physical abilities were much worse than they were as a human. But now that he has slain a ton of monsters, he is basically back to how he was before and has all the abilities he had from before he died. He's even able to use divinity despite being an undead. That wasn't expected, but it works out well for him as he uses it to keep the bread he brought good for a few more days in case he ever needs to eat. After that, he gets back to his objective of becoming a ghoul and decides he will keep his plan of killing monsters little by little and moving up in difficulty. Right now, he can handle 1 or 2 fairly easily, but 3 might be a little tough, and if he sees 4 at once, he's going to have to run, but it's not likely that the monsters will move around in such large packs. Even as an undead, Rent is still really weak. He spent 10 years as an adventurer and went nowhere with his career, even though he is able to use spirit, mana, and divinity, which is rare for a person. He is not particularly strong in any of them, so he remained as weak as ever. Deep down, he knew he wasn't cut out to be an adventurer, and most people would probably have quit after a few years of being stuck at the same bronze rank. But he never stopped trying to become a better adventurer. He trained every day and asked his friend to help him study monsters and magic. He even took on all manners of quests, no matter how small they may have been. He had a dream to become a mithril adventurer in his lifetime, a level at the top of the adventuring world, which not even the naturally gifted could easily reach. It is reserved for only the most powerful adventurers, capable of saving a kingdom on their own, and he isn't going to give up on that dream just because he has become a skeleton. He continues going through the dungeon and killing monsters, soon becoming even more powerful than he was as a human. And after killing one more slime, it finally happens. He feels something strange happening to his body as the energy flows into him and all his muscles grow back. He has become a ghoul. He is really excited even if his face isn't able to show the expression. He now has skin again, even if it is dried up and decaying, but if he keeps going at it, he may eventually turn into a vampire, and by that point, he will look exactly like a human and can return to his normal life. But for now, having more than bones means he can talk again, although it is going to take some practice to learn to speak well again. Ever since he evolved into a ghoul, he had regained his muscle back and can now move better than he could while he was a skeleton. Now he can strengthen not only his body but also his sword, and the difference is clear as he is now able to easily defeat 2 goblins in one go. Elsewhere in the dungeon, Rent finds a rookie fighting a skeleton, and the girl just barely manages to beat it. Rent is excited to finally see another human after such a long few days, but he also realizes that he can't carelessly approach her, since she would either try to kill him or just run away. He doesn't recognize her, so he assumes she must be new to this whole adventuring thing since he knows basically every adventurer in the town. Rent continues to follow the girl through the dark dungeon and realizes she is heading in the direction of that dragon cave that killed him. He has to find a way to stop her, but luckily, a skeleton spawns behind her and diverts her attention. She begins to attack, and Rent can tell that she has received good training, but she's pretty weak since she needs to land several hits in a row in order to kill the skeleton. She gets herself backed into a corner and has the skeleton closing in on her. Rent can no longer sit still and watch her embarrass herself, so he steps up to save her before she gets deleted by the skeleton. As he approaches, the skeleton recognizes him as the bigger threat, so it turns around to face him. But Rent is screaming internally at the girl because she has a clear shot to backstab it right there. Take the shot. Realizing she isn't going to be of any help, Rent takes matters into his own rotten flesh-covered hands and one-shots the skeleton. After that is taken care of, Rent tries to approach the girl, but she is understandably freaked out to have a ghoul approached so casually. To try to calm her down, Rent starts saying he doesn't intend to hurt her, while also dropping his sword. He tries to explain to the girl that he is the adventurer Rent, but then she asks why he looks like this now. He explains that he got killed by a dragon, but she just wants to confirm that he isn't going to try and eat her or anything. Rent swears that he has no intention of doing so, but he asks that she help him out with something if she's willing. He wants her to buy him some clothes because he would like to go back to the town, something like a robe so he can hide his body. He gives her his pouch of money and tells her she can keep the rest if she buys him the clothes that he is asking for. The girl now understands that Rent truly isn't trying to hurt her, so she introduces herself as Rena and swears that she will repay him for his help saving her from that skeleton. However, she still keeps her sword pointed towards him the entire time as she leaves. Rhett doesn't really like how cautious she is being around him, but that is probably how an adventurer should act in a situation like this. Come to think of it, a proper adventurer would also probably just report a situation like this to the Adventurers Guild rather than actually help him, but he doesn't think Rena would betray him. As Rena returns to town, she immediately goes back to the guild receptionist who had been worried sick about her since she didn't come back from the dungeon on time. Rena says she is fine, but a lot of stuff happened, so she would like to ask about some. Later on in the labyrinth, Rand is fighting a slime and can tell that he is much stronger than he was as a human. He is much more powerful and can use his body to its full potential now more than he ever could. Now, if only his face did look like a wrinkled nutsack. From the dungeon entrance, Ren hears Rena calling out to him, and he is honestly surprised that she actually came back for him. As he approaches her, she notices him and immediately draws her sword out of fear because she isn't sure that he is the same ghoul she met earlier, but after Rent confirms that it is actually him, and he seems to have gotten himself past preschool levels of talking after a lot of practice so Rena can understand him better. Back on topic, she tells him that she has brought the clothes he asked for, as well as his change, which she goes to set down beside the bag, but Rent gets a little too close, so she starts backing away in fear again. But she apologizes and tells him that she is a little scared of him, but she will eventually get used to it, so he shouldn't feel bad. Rent tells her it's fine and goes to look through the clothes that she brought for him, and it is absolutely perfect. Rena even went the extra mile and bought him a pair of boots and gloves to hide the rest of his body. She's so considerate that it's enough to make a grown man cry, but not Rent, because he still doesn't have tear ducts. Rent tries on the clothes and he looks cool as heck with that outfit. He loses some visibility, but that is the price you have to pay for looking so cool, although there is still the problem of his nut sack face, so he needs to do something about it before he can return to town. Rena had thought of this as well and bought a mask for Rent to hide his face, but as he tries it on, it gets sucked into his face and he can't seem to pull it off. This mask clearly has Curse of Binding on it, so Rena apologizes for bringing it to him. Now that she really thinks about it, she should have known better than to trust it back Allie's stall. It was also pretty suspicious that the mask was so cheap, but she was blinded by the Black Friday savings. She apologizes again, but she did check the item for a curse before bringing it here and didn't react, so it must be a curse that only activates when it is put on. If it is a curse, then maybe Ren can dispel it with the divinity he has. Rena is surprised that he can use divinity even as an undead monster, but the power he has wasn't enough for him to get rid of the curse. It doesn't look like he will be able to take off the mask anytime soon, but it doesn't really matter since he needed to hide his face anyway. Now that Rent looks less undead, Rena suggests that they can return to town together, so they both get on a carriage to ride to Malt. On the way there, Rena tells Rent that she registered to become an adventurer in the capital, but there were too many skilled adventurers there, so she was forced to leave due to the skill gap. She came out Malt because it was much more newbie-friendly than most towns. Plus, it had 2 labyrinths nearby, so that was an added bonus. Red agrees that coming to Malt was a good decision for her to make, but he is surprised that she was willing to come all the way out to the countryside despite being a city kid. They get to the town gate, but Ren is hesitant to go through since almost everyone here knows him, so they'll be able to tell that something is wrong if he shows them his ID. If that's the case, then she suggests that they go to the west gate since that one normally isn't used as much. They get to the west gate and are asked to present their identification to enter. They do so and are allowed passage, but the guards take issue with Ren's cool but emo outfit and start hassling him to show his face. Rena comes up with a story on the spot and tells the guards that Rent was badly injured in the dungeon, so bought a mask to hide his scars. However, the mask turned out to be cursed, so he can't take it off now. Rent even offers to let them try to take the mask off if they don't believe him, so after confirming that it is cursed, they feel kind of bad for hassling an injured man and let him go through. Once inside the town, Rena is excited to go around and do things with Rent, but just like that, he went to get the milk and disappeared. From a nearby rooftop, Brent watches Rena, and he can tell that she's going to become a great adventurer, so when he looks a bit more human, he will come back and apologize to her. For now, he has to go find his friend so she can help him figure things out, so that night, Ren shows up to Lorraine's house and finds her sleeping on the couch. Even while sleepy, she can tell it is Rent from the way he acts, but there is definitely something wrong here. So she decided to play a little prank and act like she was sleeping, but after seeing what happened to him, it's a little too late to say it's just a prank, bro. Lorraine has studied monsters all her life, but she has never heard anything about someone getting eaten by a dragon and turned into an undead after they get shit out. Coming from anyone else, she wouldn't believe a single word that was just said, but since it is coming from Ren and he currently looks like one of the malnourished children that Nestle uses for labor, she's inclined to accept his statements as fact. Ren appreciates that Lorraine isn't freaking out over his new look and is just thinking about it calmly, but it does feel like she thinks of him slightly more as a test subject than a friend. After pondering for a bit, she turns to Ren and asks if he really is the same person. And that's a fair question, since even though he still has his memories and thinks the same, there is no guarantee that he is actually the same. For now, though, he acts normal enough for Lorraine to trust him, so she asks what he intends to do from here on out. Brett tells her that he wants to keep being an adventurer since while he may have died already, his dream of becoming a mithril adventurer lives on. However, he can't show up to the Adventurers Guild looking like this, so to continue adventuring, he needs Lorraine to accept quests for him, plus, he would need somewhere to stay since he can't go back to his inn either, so Lorraine offers her home to him. In exchange, all she asks is that he helps her with his research. Rhett knows exactly what that means when he is dealing with Lorraine, so he makes it clear that she isn't allowed to dissect him or anything. She tells him that there is no need to worry since she never intended to do that in the first place, though she may take a bit of his flesh for science. Later that day, Ren is doing some cleaning to help out when Lorraine comes back with some money in hand. He had asked her to help him sell the items he collected while he was in the dungeon, but she decided to just pay him for it directly, since this way she won't have to pay the guild's fees. Isn't tax evasion great? Ren thanks her for the help, and now that he has some money to use, he announces that he will be going to the blacksmith to get a new sword. Rent walks through the streets, happy to be able to move around freely again, but he is still subject to the judging stares of the people that find his look to be terrifying. He pulls his hood down and just keeps moving until he gets to the blacksmith, but the receptionist lady there is also frightened by him. He apologizes for looking so unsightly, and the lady realizes that she is being really rude, so she ignores how he looks and asks what he would like her to do for him. Red tells her that he wants to have his sword repaired, so the lady takes a look at it, and from the damage it has taken, she can tell that he knows how to handle a sword well. It looks like he can also use spirit too, which Ren confirms, adding that he can use mana and divinity as well. The lady is surprised, as it is really rare for anyone to be able to use all three. In fact, there's so only one other person whom she has ever seen who is able to use all three, which coincidentally is also Rent. He asks her not to make a big deal out of it since he would like to avoid too much attention, so the lady promises not to speak a word about it to anyone else. Rent pulls out the money Lorraine paid him and asks if this will be enough to have a new sword made for him. So the lady takes a look and says it should do the job, but is going to take some time for it to be finished since their blacksmith is very thorough in his work. Rent says he is fine with the wait time, so whenever the sword is ready, they should contact Lorraine to get a hold of him. Meanwhile, Lorraine is reading up on the information that is available about ghouls. They are lower-class undead monsters, and there have been cases reported where a powerful monster was able to turn people into undead, but in those cases, the people seem to have lost all personality and human emotion with their transformation. However, that clearly isn't the case with Rent right now. She knows that something about him must have changed. He still feels like the same old Rent she knew. We get a flashback to when Lorraine was younger and Rent was just a newbie adventurer, and as she took out a quest which required a bit of traveling, a man called out to her and asked that she takes Rent along with her so he can gain some experience as an adventurer. Thus, they went out into the forest where Lorraine began searching for some herbs. She was having trouble finding them, so she started thinking that the information she had been given may have been wrong. The world was a really boring place for her at the time since she was just too good at life. She became the youngest person to ever receive the title of Great Doctor, but she didn't care about her achievement, was starting to get tired of being surrounded by adults all the time. Great Doctors get the perk of being able to sign up as adventurers and start at silver rank, so for no other reason than she was bored, Lorraine decided that she would go out and become an adventurer. She finally spotted one of the plants she needed and excitedly began to harvest it. Afterwards, she calls Rent over so she can put her harvest in the bag, but then she sees that Rent beat her out by at least 10 times in plant gathering. She is about to ask him to tell her how he managed this, but Rent cuts her off because he notices something is off. There is a goblin currently staring them down, and it is about to fire an arrow, so Rent tells for Lorraine to use a fire spell to take it down before it can do any damage to them. Lorraine does as he says, and a huge fireball is launched, destroying the goblin and somehow not starting a forest fire in the process. Lorraine is shaken by the experience but tries to play it off by saying she has been in many situations like this before, although she had several people guarding her back then. That is when she realized that Rent wasn't sent with her as training, but rather because the people at the guild were worried that she wouldn't be able to handle herself if things got dangerous. However, Rent is still a new adventurer, so she wonders how he could be so knowledgeable, so Rent recounts what he was told. If you want to become a good adventurer, then you need to learn to read and write, as well as learn about plants and monsters and anything else possible. And just like that, Lorraine was raised up. She asks Rent if he could teach her everything he knows about adventuring from then on, and since then, she's been by Rent's side as he tries to become a mithril adventurer. Meanwhile, Rent has finalized the details of the sword he once made, so he says goodbye to the blacksmith and the receptionist. Before he goes, he is handed a replacement sword for him to use while his main one is being made. As he leaves, the blacksmith and receptionist talk to each other, and it seems they realize that the guy they were talking to had to be Rent. After all, there aren't many people who can use all three attributes and also have a close relationship with Lorraine, but he is clearly in a bit of trouble. They think he has been cursed, but don't understand why he didn't try to come to them for help and instead kept his identity a secret. The blacksmith thinks that it may not be that he doesn't trust them, but he just isn't the kind of person to cause trouble for others even if he needs help. For now, though, it seems like he will keep coming to their shop, so they'll get another chance to see him again. That evening, Rent made dinner for Lorraine, but while she greatly enjoyed the meal, Rent wasn't able to enjoy it since ghouls don't get hungry at all. This brings up the topic Lorraine wanted to discuss. She spent all day combing through every book she had on his situation, but there isn't much info available. All she can tell is that Rent's case is special, which is probably why he is able to evolve in the first place. She asks what he plans to evolve into next, but he has no idea what it is going to be. All he wants is to look as human as possible so he can live like he used to. So to do that, he is going to need to head back into the labyrinth and defeat more monsters. In the labyrinth, there is a man fighting a slime, and it is very clear that he has no idea what he is doing as he is about to get himself dissolved. However, Rent happened to be passing by and saved the guy from certain doom, and immediately after he starts walking off. In the labyrinth, it is an adventurer's responsibility to make sure they come back alive, so you are not obligated to help others if they are in danger. There are even some ill-intentioned individuals who would pretend to be hurt just to lure you into a trap and rob you. The man catches up to Ren and asks that he let him join him while he goes through the labyrinth. As you can probably tell by now, this guy is new to adventuring and can't take down a slime, but he is a chef in malt and is currently drowning in debt, so he needs to find a way to pay back 15 gold by next week. He turned to adventuring to make some quick cash, but most parties rejected him because he was inexperienced. So he just needs Rent to give him a chance, and he promises that he will do everything within his power to make himself useful. Rent tells the man that he is busy, and besides, this dungeon has already been explored so much that your chances of finding anything valuable are incredibly low. Rent suddenly realizes that there might be a way to help this guy make the money he needs, so he decides to let him tag along and shows him the way to the new room in the dungeon where he died. The guy thinks he can make a fortune just by giving this information to the guild, but he knows Rent is the one who actually found it, so he can't take credit for it. Rent tells him that it's fine for him to take the credit since he needs the money anyway, but he wants the man to stick around with him while he keeps exploring the hidden passage. They come up on a hidden passage, and Rent has the experience to know that you never trust an empty room in a labyrinth, but the man has no such sense. He steps straight into a teleportation circle and gets sent off to who knows where instantly. Now the smart thing to do would be for Rent to ditch the guy and act like he never met him, but he wouldn't be the MC if he did that, so he follows through the circle and finds the man laid out on the floor and a giant skeleton monster staring him down. Rent looks over to the unconscious man and realizes that he needs to act fast if he wants there to be any hope of him surviving. However, as he tries to bring the skeleton down by striking at its leg, he is unable to do any damage to its bones. If spirit energy isn't able to damage it, Rent decides to use his magic energy instead, but that is ineffective as well. Looking at his situation, the exit to the room has disappeared, so he is likely currently fighting the boss. And if that is the case, then he won't be able to escape until he has defeated it. Terrible luck considering he didn't want to deal with this, but since it is an undead skeleton, he should be able to damage it if he uses divinity. He's not sure if his sword will be able to hold up against his strikes, but he uses divinity and slashes at the skeleton's leg, this time severing it completely and forcing it down to the ground. And with the skeleton grounded, Rent leaps on top of it before splitting its skull in two. After the fight is over, the man wakes up to find Rent healing him. All he remembers is being attacked by a huge skeleton and being knocked out, but doesn't look like he needs to worry about the skeleton anymore since it's laid out in pieces on the floor over there. He is amazed that Rent was able to take down a monster of that size, and when he is shown the size of the crystal that came from it, he is even more impressed. Rent offers to let him just have the mana crystal so he can pay off his debt, but under some conditions, of course. The man doesn't know how he could possibly be of any use to a powerful adventurer like Rent, so he shows the man his arm and tells him that since he looks like this because a monster got to him, he can't go into the guild or regular shops without scaring the people, so he would like him to do those things for him. The man doesn't think it is fair to Rent for him to give up this valuable gem in exchange for some errands, so Rent adds another condition that he is allowed to eat for free at his restaurant when he gets it back up and running. The man breaks down in tears from the kindness Rent has shown him in both saving his life and giving him the means to get his restaurant back. Rent tells him to get up so they can leave the labyrinth, but the man doesn't know how they are meant to get out of here since there is no door present. It seems that regular people can't see it, but a magic teleportation circle is clearly visible to Rent from where he is standing. Even though he doesn't see anything there, the man trusts Rent's word and goes over to the teleportation circle, leaving Rent behind in the room. Rent would like to go on ahead in the labyrinth, but with how much has happened today, it's going to have to be another time. The man takes Rent to his restaurant where his wife, Isabella, had been anxiously awaiting his return. She was so worried he would end up dead in the dungeon, and he nearly did, but luckily Rent was there to bail him out. He tells his wife the great news that Rent offered him this huge magic gem to clear their debt, but his wife is skeptical because there's no such thing as free money. As hard as it may be to believe, Rent was actually generous enough to help him out in his time of need, but it's not completely free as the man now has to help Rent out when he needs it. His wife worries some more that he might end up doing some dangerous stuff, but he assures her that Rent only needs him to run errands for him. He was also promised unlimited free food at the restaurant, but even that doesn't compare to the value of the gem Rent has given them. They are happy to finally be able to get their life back on track without having to sell their kidneys, but first, they both sincerely thank Rent for all he has done for them. The man introduces himself as Loris and asks for the name of his savior. So Rent introduces himself properly but asks that Loris keep his name a secret. Loris swears to never tell anyone and thanks Rent once more as he leaves, but something is not right with Rent right now. As he was walking down an alleyway, he thinks to himself that he was hoping Loris would turn out to be a criminal or something, so it wouldn't have mattered if he died in the dungeon or not. His mind is growing cloudy and he isn't able to think clearly anymore, so with Lorraine's house in sight, he walks in. Lorraine is oblivious to the shift in Rent's personality, so when he suddenly hugs her, she thinks he has finally caught on to the hints she's been dropping. If only this had happened while he still had his wiener. Unfortunately, while Rent was definitely making an advance, it wasn't the kind she would have hoped for as while hugging her. Rent's mask changes form to free his mouth, and he takes a huge bite out of her neck. This is when she realizes that Rent might not be in his right mind, so she calls out to him to find out if his consciousness is still in there somewhere. Rent reacts, so she's at least reassured that he is still human, but with his current state, she is forced to use magic to blast him. Just enough to incapacitate, but not kill him, as she wants to hear what happened from him later. She isn't upset about what he did, but if he's going to do that, at least come into her while still sane. Rent wakes up a while later and has a terrible headache. Lorraine is sitting across from him and asks if he still has the urge to devour her. Rent has regained his sanity, so he no longer craves Lorraine's juicy flesh, and now that that has been cleared up, she begins asking him what he remembers of the incident. Rent recognized this strange urge back with Loris when he found himself wishing Loris was someone he could kill so he could eat him. But after he turned out to be a good person, Rent came back here and Lorraine suddenly looked so delicious so he couldn't help himself. He apologizes for what he has done, and Lorraine doesn't hold it against him because she knows he didn't do it of his own volition. Lorraine had figured something like this might happen since ghouls prefer to eat the flesh of humans, but more importantly, she asks if Rent's body is okay, since she did use a lot of power to knock him out, but Rent says he is doing alright. Even if he says he is fine, Lorraine suggests that he get some rest so he can heal, and she'll do the same in the next room over. Before she goes, Rent stops her and asks to see the wound he inflicted on her. Lorraine complies with his request, so Rent uses his divinity to begin healing her wound. Lorraine is surprised by the amount of divinity Rent is able to use, but this should be enough to heal a wound like this, so by the time Rent is done, there are nothing but some faint bite marks on her shoulder. This still isn't good enough for Rent, so he pours more divinity into the wound until it completely disappears. Since the wound is fine, she can't use it as a reason Rent needs to marry her now, but now that she thinks about it, the way he looks has changed quite a lot. His body looks almost human now, so he might really be able to pass this off as an injury that he got. He checks himself in the mirror and realizes that his mask changed form, so now his awful lit game is on full display. This is terrible for him since he needs to keep that hidden, but as he thinks this, the mask changes form to cover his atrocious lips but leaves his eyes uncovered. This means he is able to control the mask to some extent with his desires, but when he tries to get the mask to come off, he doesn't budge even slightly. For now, this isn't too bad since he does still look like an undead, so he would still need to keep the mask on anyway. As he changes its form to cover his mouth, Lorraine points out that he is able to speak much clearer than he could a moment ago, so he comes to the conclusion that he must have evolved again. But why did that happen now if he defeated the skeleton boss while he was still in the dungeon? Lorraine hypothesizes that it could have been because he ate her flesh, but she still isn't sure of it herself. Right now, he looks a lot like a ghast, but not the floating fireball blaster. Kind that serves under a vampire, but there is still no explanation for why a ghast was his next form. Even among the world's top academics, evolution remains a mystery, but she has got a hypothesis regarding the matter. The two sit down to talk, and Lorraine begins by saying Rent was a skeleton at first, but then he evolved into a ghoul. But the very fact that he evolved into a ghoul is strange in and of itself. If evolution was just a monster becoming a more powerful version of itself, then why didn't he go from a skeleton to a skeleton knight or something? Sure, there are cases where skeletons have turned into ghouls before, but in Rent's case, I think it is safe to infer that when evolving, you take the form of whatever monster you want to be. That is certainly plausible since Rent wanted to look more human like a vampire and he is on that tech tree now. But if that's the case, then why didn't he just go straight up to being a vampire since he really wanted to? It was probably due to him not being high enough in level to get to a vampire. There are no guarantees of returning to being a human, but it is certain that if he intends to become a vampire, then defeating powerful monsters may not be enough anymore. There are still a lot of things they don't know about the evolution, but they'll cross that bridge when they get to it. But with that out of the way, there are some experiments that Lorraine would like to try out on Rent since he is transformed, so she asks him to take off all his clothes, as with him having more meat on his bones, he may have gotten his other meat back as well. She's going to look over every inch of his body and also wants some flesh samples, but she knows Rent must already be pretty tired from all that happened today, so she decides to let him rest for the day. The next day, as Lorraine is still in bed while Rent is out training, his flesh-eating impulse is gone and he feels perfectly fine, but his sword is in no shape for him to use it in a fight. He goes back to the blacksmith and the guy certainly isn't pleased with the condition of the lone sword. Rent apologizes and explains to Cloak that he ran into a giant skeleton and was forced to use divinity on the sword to defeat the monster. That explains why the sword is so damaged, but there shouldn't be any monsters in that labyrinth that require the use of divinity. So Rent then explains that he found a hidden area in the labyrinth, and Cloak assumes that's why he looks like this now. In any case, Rent would like a sword so he can go explore that labyrinth hidden room again. So to accommodate him, Cloak gives him a better sword, but also reveals that he knows it is Rent under that mask. As Rent leaves, he can't believe he was found out by Cloak, but at least he got a new sword to use in the dungeon. This should help him get his next evolution. Later, Rent is down in Lorraine's lab and he promised to help her with her experiments, but he's starting to have second thoughts about this now that he sees the concoction she was cooking up. She had Rent drink the poison and it tasted terrible, but that was all. It has no negative side effects on him whatsoever thanks to his undead nature. Yet he is still able to use healing potions and herbs, so he definitely doesn't follow the normal rules of being undead. By this point, Lorraine has gotten really sleepy from all the experiments she has performed on Rent, which prompts her to ask if he still feels the need to sleep even when he is aghast. He answers that he barely needs any sleep at all. However, when it comes to his appetite, although he doesn't like to admit it, he has a slight desire to drink human blood. Lorraine had expected as much and offers Rent a vial containing a mystery liquid. He hesitantly takes it, but as he opens the bottle and takes a sniff, he finds that the liquid is human blood. Lorraine assures him that it is her own blood, so while he may be hesitant to consume human blood, he needs to take a little every once in a while to keep himself from losing control and attacking random people like he did last time. Rent accepts her kindness and then puts a drop of blood on his finger so he can taste the blood, and it is delicious. For now, all he needs to keep himself in check is one drop, so he will make sure this vial will last for a long time. He tells her that he will be heading out soon, so she should get some rest while he is gone. He plans to head into the labyrinth, but first, since he has a more human-looking body, he thinks he might be able to go to the guild in person this time. Lorraine can immediately tell that it is going to be a bad idea, since if he wants to take on a job there, he will have to bring out his adventurer card, and there will be an uproar if everyone finds out this is what he looks like now. He doesn't see what the big deal is since he was just a regular old bronze adventurer, but Lorraine points out that the guild really liked him. He would always help out by guiding new adventurers and taking on the jobs that no one else wanted to do. There were even meetings about bringing Ren into work for the guild. He had no idea that they valued him so much even though he's not even a high-ranked adventurer, but they really did want to hire him. They just wanted to wait for him to retire from adventuring first. Rhett has no plans to ever retire from the guild, which is what Lorraine had expected, but there is still the problem of him taking on quests. If he ever wants to get to Mithril, he is going to have to prove himself to rank up. But in order to do that, he has to take the quests personally. And since he can't show up there as Rhett without causing a fuss, Lorraine suggests that he go in and register as a new person. Rhett takes her advice, so later that day, he walks into the guild for the first time since he dies, and he is glad to see this familiar building. He spots Sheila over at the front desk and walks over to register as a new adventurer. Sheila tells him that there is paperwork that he needs to fill out, but if he would like, she can help with that. Rent tells her it's fine since he is able to read and write by himself. The last time Rent filled out this form was over 10 years ago now. As he finishes filling out the form, Sheila is surprised to see that he put his name down as Rent Vivier. She says another adventurer who was also called Rent went missing a while ago. Brent is glad to see that she was worried about someone like him, but to throw her off his trail, he asks if she is talking about a guy called Rent Fena. Sheila asks how he could have known that, so he tells her that he is a relative of Lorraine and she informed him of the situation. Sheila is disappointed because lately there were rumors of a strange man going and coming from Lorraine's house. She was hoping it was the Rent whom she had known, but it seems like she was mistaken. Sheila heads off into the back to finish his paperwork, and while she is gone, Rent thinks to himself that it was a good thing he said he was Lorraine's relative. He wouldn't want to have people mistakenly think she had a lover or something. Sheila returns to Rent after completing his registration and tells him that he is now an Iron-class adventurer, but she gives him a warning not to get himself killed. Rent later heads into the dungeon and this time he hears a fight happening off in the distance. The voices sound like those of some kids, so he goes to take a look and finds a swordsman and a healer fighting a goblin. They are probably new adventurers, but they seem to be working well enough together, so he decides to leave them alone. For now, he has to hurry and explore that hidden room before any of the other adventurers here find it. He returns to the teleportation circle and steps in, finding himself teleported to a creepy bedroom. He looks around a little and finds a skeleton on the bed, but this is just a regular skeleton. This means that there was someone living in this dungeon at some point, but before he can take a closer look, a woman appears from behind him and asks him to state his intentions for being here. He can already tell that she is bad news, so Rhett tries to defuse the situation by telling her that he is an adventurer and just came to search this place. However, that does nothing to calm the woman down, since if he is an adventurer, then that means he came here looking for something to steal. She doesn't want this place to be disturbed, so she raises her hand to fire a magic blast at Rent. And although he tried to use spirit to block, it still blew him back against a wall. His shirt was destroyed in the process, revealing his gassed body. The woman sees this and seems to understand what happened, so she apologizes to him for the misunderstanding. The woman knows Rent must be upset right now because she just burned off his clothes and also tried to kill him, so to make up for it, she offers him her coat in exchange, revealing that she's got barely any clothes underneath. She doesn't seem too bothered by her lack of clothing and tells Rent that her cloak is nice and more valuable than the clothes he was wearing before, so that this shouldn't be enough. Rent is just glad that she no longer wants to kill him, so he takes the cloak. The woman explains to him that this place is really special to her, so she would greatly appreciate it if Rent would be kind enough to keep this place a secret for her sake. This means she doesn't want him to report to the guild about the hidden room, but it's not like telling the guild would actually be terrible for her, since no one can enter this place unless Rent comes in with them. Since he is still an adventurer, the woman doesn't want to send him back empty-handed, so she offers him an acacia map instead. The map is a magic item that will automatically record the spaces which its owner has traveled through. With this, the woman says they are even and proceeds to teleport Rent out of the dungeon. He wakes up at the dungeon entrance and goes to see Lorraine to explain everything that just happened to him. At this point, she thinks Rent might be cursed with how many life-threatening situations he gets put in every day. In any case, after taking a look at the magic map, Lorraine can say with certainty that it is not cursed, so it is alright for Rent to use it if he wants to. He asks if she knows how to use it, but when she tries, it doesn't react to her magic at all. She asks Rent to give it a shot, so he applies his magic and the map begins to record the entirety of the labyrinth he usually goes to. This is amazing by itself, but it also shows the names and locations of people who are currently in the labyrinth. This puts this map at the level of a national treasure, and it can also show layouts of other dungeons as well, but only the paths that Rent has used. Since the map turned out to be so great, Rent asks Lorraine to take a look at the cloak he got, and after a brief look, she can confirm that it is of really high quality. The cloak has very high magic resistance imbued in it, and it is so strong that a blade wouldn't be able to pierce through it. Rent is starting to think he got a really good deal with the trade from the woman, but there is still the question of who this woman who tried to kill him truly is. He doesn't have much to go off of, but he knows that she was really strong, at least stronger than a gold-class adventurer. This intrigues Lorraine further, as it means there is someone out there who has the ability to make a living space within the labyrinth. Rent says he is going to go back into the labyrinth tomorrow, but she doesn't think that is a good idea, especially since he nearly got killed today. The way Rent sees it, his going back should be fine since the woman just told him not to tell the guild about this place, not that he could never come back. As Rent enters the dungeon the next day, he thinks about what Lorraine said about him being cursed. It may be true, as he accidentally found a hidden area and encountered one of the most powerful beings in the world immediately. He became undead and then got a curse mask by accident, but he doesn't view himself as unlucky or anything. Thanks to all that happened, he has been able to fight powerful enemies and get stronger than he ever could have gotten as a human. He heads back to that hidden area, but this time the entrance has been sealed up completely. He checks his map to make sure he isn't mistaken about the location, but when he looks at the map, it no longer shows anything behind the wall. This must mean the woman doesn't want him to come back here right now. Back at the guild, people are still asking about the situation with Rent Faina, who is still missing, and they are trying to remain hopeful, but saying he may have taken on a long escort mission, but by now is starting to look like he is gone for good. Just then, Rent appears behind her and gives her a jump scare. He wants to take on a quest and shows it to Sheila. The quest is one which involves fighting 3 orcs at once, so Sheila thinks it may be a bit too difficult for Rent since he just recently joined the guild. However, he assures her that he is up for the task since he is strong enough to defeat orcs by himself. Thus, Sheila entrusts him with a quest, adding that he shouldn't do anything too risky since his life should always be more important, and Rent understands that better than anyone, having already lost 1 life. This was the end of episode 5. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.